This is 2OF Entertainment.
Welcome to the Lost Dollar Business Club, where we talk about business, and not just business. We talk about what makes businesses go up and what makes businesses go down. If you're interested in businesses, this is where it is. We talk about the global economy. We talk about global politics. We talk about everything and anything business related that affects your life on a global scale as well as a local scale. And don't miss after the show, Lost and Found.
Welcome back to the Lost Dollar Business Club. Nick has returned by special invitation because he's been so fucking busy recently. Before we get started, I'm going to bring Kevin, our guest, up into the mix straight away because I want to get him involved in all this. And just briefly to say, Kevin and I connected on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has been a really great platform for me, reaching more men, to be honest. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. So Kevin, give everybody a quick kind of schniz on where you live, what you do, because I think you've got a really interesting LinkedIn profile, backstory, work, job, career. So give us an update.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Nick. It's good to see both of you today in various parts of the world. But my background is kind of a unique one. I started as a teacher. I taught for 10 years in the classroom, and then I became an administrator, a school administrator. Did that for 7 years. And then I went to the dark side, to the business side of things. And I've been there for 26 years. And I've loved every bit of it. I actually started as a local representative, as a state representative for a family-owned company that was selling critical thinking skills, a system to schools and districts throughout the state.
We've got to talk about that.
Well, we do for sure, because there's more to come with that. But I did that for several years, and then I got, oversight of the Western U.S. and then the whole U.S. and a little bit of international. And then I went into the AR, VR world, and I did that for about 5 years with a startup out of Silicon Valley and worked with this amazing technology that was augmented reality, where the things literally came off the screen without the aid of goggles or glasses. And so that was fascinating. And I did that and built a business in Texas with that organization. Then I went to another family-owned company and helped with a platform for continuous improvement for school districts across the nation, and then also streamlining a lot of their federal dollars, just all the responsibilities and upkeep that is required to maintain compliance with all that. So I did that for a couple of years, and now I'm with a new startup called NeuroPoints, developed by Dr. David Hirely. Again, focus on critical thinking, but more importantly, bridging the gap for students between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. So I'm 4 months in my new gig.
You can see why there's lots to unpack here. And
yes,
you said the word critical thinking. I don't think I'd thought about critical thinking until around 2020, when I started to spend more time looking at how the world worked. And realizing that a lot of people lack the ability to think critically, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Often they will just believe whatever they see on the news, stories, or in the media and what have you, which kind of links now to AI in the digital world.
Yes.
And that's why I thought it really interesting to talk to you, because if we take back 20 years, most of what we can use now as tools to run business or learn and teach kids just either wasn't around or we didn't have access to it. So Where do you see that level of, how can I put it, the level of tech coming in at the moment? How have you managed to implement it, and what do you think kids should be using as well? Because there'll be a lot of parents that listen to this thinking it's so hard to know where to start with kids.
Yeah, what we want and need to do is get the resources and the tools in the hands of the students as soon as possible, because in my experience, the thing that inhibits students having that full access, unfortunately, a lot of times is the educators, the teachers, it's the administrators. They're not comfortable with it themselves. They don't have a deep understanding of it. Parents don't know what they don't know. So if we can get it directly in the hands of students who are digital natives, who are tech savvy, then they'll take it and run with it. And so that's our goal with my current organization, with NeuroPoints, is to put this system in the hands of kids to where they can digitally create a neurocode, we're calling it. And then that neurocode, in essence, becomes the visual prompt for AI. So the thinking is done up front. See, the fear with AI is going to do the thinking for us. It's going to dumb down our society because people won't have to think. Like you said, they're going to become more consumers than ever. They're just going to consume all this information, take it as gospel truth, not question it, and move forward. But if we can teach the students how to think critically about a given topic, code it visually, input that into AI, use AI as the tool it's designed to be, to facilitate creating some type of a written output so that we can then communicate those thoughts and ideas more effectively, more clearly, then that's awesome. I mean, why not use the great tools that we have at our fingertips?
It's so interesting. Nick, any questions or thoughts on this at the moment?
Questions for me?
Nick, any questions?
Yeah, I think there's a
Nick's got rubbish connection.
Yeah.
We'll come back to him in a minute.
and I think it's super critical. You really hit the nail on the head. I think.
Are you back with us, Nick? This is the joys of tech.
He's looking very thoughtful. He's thinking critically right now.
Jeez, the joys of tech. No, I really appreciate your Genesis 2. This is not going well.
Well, Kevin, I'll just
the two.
Whilst Nick's connection, where do you start then with age ranges for helping kids with this stuff, and how does that, do you think, prepare them better for the business world that we are currently in?
I love that. I love that question because I think historically we haven't done a good enough job of bridging the pre-K 12, that the school period of life with the workforce. And there should be a more seamless transition. In fact, I've often felt that the business world should be working more in tandem with the schools, public, charter, private, whatever the configuration is of the schools, because they're the ones helping to produce the product, the worker that is going to be entering the workforce. So if you think about it, what's the workforce demanding today worldwide? They want workers that are critical thinkers, problem solvers, adaptable, cooperative, get along with others, all these kinds of things. Because again, a lot of things are going to become automated. We are going to be moving in that direction. So those tasks that are more menial, that are more, of the industrial age, where humans were doing that work, that's the type of work that AI will be doing moving forward. So that's not what we need to be preparing kids for. So sitting kids in rows and having a teacher at the front delivering information that they then regurgitate out on a test on Friday, that is not going to adequately prepare students for the future. And yet we still do it. We persist, even though we know it's not doing what it needs to do to prepare the young people for the workforce.
Spot on. And you'll be pleased to know that we home educate our kids. So we don't send them to school, which means that, and there's multiple reasons why, but one of them is I felt that the school system, of course, is a system, and it's built, and I get it, to kind of, gently help a child with lots of different topics,
Sure.
But that doesn't necessarily feed into their real interests. And for our kids and a lot of the home educated kids we know, you want to, whatever they're interested in, you want to feed that more, and they'll learn the other stuff via their interest. Whereas if you're saying 1 hour here, 1 hour here, they jump from thing to thing. And home education is certainly growing. The governments don't like home education because obviously you're out of the system. But then for you, how would you say business has evolved for you as a man? Because you've obviously worked for different companies, and the changing landscape of tech is going to take some jobs. So where do you see the kind of, especially in the US, like the line in AI at the moment, and how's it affected you?
Well, I mean, I've changed roles 3 times in the past 5 years.
Right.
Since COVID, I've changed that many times. And I want to interject a quick thing real quickly here, Anthony and Nick, and that is 5 years ago, I underwent I went through a significant heart incident. I Went in for a routine heart stent procedure. I suffered from high cholesterol most of my life, tall, skinny dude with high cholesterol. Went in to have it stented, and the cardiologist inadvertently severed an artery, perforated an artery. So I had a massive heart attack on the table, and I actually coded for 48 minutes. So I was down for the count for 48 minutes. They were able to install a closed stent to stop the internal bleeding, begin CPR, which they did for a long time. My kidneys had already shut down. The device that they installed in my heart to help it, beat, if they could get it beating again, was not fully sterilized, so I developed sepsis. My lungs filled with fluid, so I had no lung capacity. Therefore, I was placed on a respirator on life support and in a coma for 18 days. They left the impella in too long, the little motor for my heart, and it ended up tearing up my mitral valve. So I ended up needing open heart surgery. And the other thing that happened is I went in for this procedure on March 6th of 2020.
Great.
1 week later, the world shut down. So it was a Rip Van Winkle moment, because I woke up from a coma 18 days later and the whole world had changed. And so it was surreal. And then they carted me to another hospital, cut me open, fixed my heart, closed me back up. And but I share that with you for context, because you asked me, as a man, kind of how you're dealing with the changing landscape in business and so forth. Well, imagine as a man being almost 60 years old and going through 3 major job changes.
Yeah.
Especially following such a dramatic, traumatic life incident, right? So I think what it has taught me is the importance of resilience, and the importance of just staying focused on putting one foot in front of the other, and not fearing the future, but embracing it, embracing the fact that I can learn something new. Even at late 50s, I can learn cutting edge augmented virtual reality technology. I can learn about AI and how we can better equip students and adults to embrace and take full advantage of the human intelligence. We have so much cognitive capability that is yet untapped. And how can we tap more of that human intelligence and that cognitive capacity we have, so that we can in turn stay ahead of AI and use it as a tool to facilitate the work that we do going forward?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And again, multiple areas. Nick, your connection seems better now. So do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm not too sure what's happening this side. Kevin, I think that's a really, really beautiful sort of connection of all the tendrils that come in, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not the mind tends to focus on one area and go, well, that's exactly what's happening. But I love the context, because it's exactly it's fascinating in that whole the two things
Nick,
you spoke about is the resilience and the change, because neither of those.
See, we need better tech for Nick.
Anthony,
it's okay.
I'm gonna leave it to you, because at the moment I don't know what's happening on my side, man. I apologize. I'm literally on Wi-Fi on fiber, so I'm not so sure. The rats and mice aren't running fast enough, so I think you go for it.
It needs another 50p in the meter. And Kevin, it's really important you talk about when you say resilience, because as men get older, and regardless of male or female, but obviously I feel like we feel more resistant to change because it's fucking scary sometimes. And I know myself, I did a job when I worked in the city where I knew pretty much everything I needed to know about it. And after 8 or 10 years, and then when I went to do something new, suddenly I felt totally out of my comfort zone, because it was new tech, new people, new systems, new markets. And it's really interesting how you forget how much you are able to beautifully coast in work when you know what you're doing. But going out for a new challenge as you get older can be hard. How long was it from when you had the hospital incident, let's say, that we'll say that kindly to the medical establishment, because they're doing their best, but were you then able to get back to actually working, or feel like you could get back to working?
Yeah, there was a silver lining to COVID in that. So I was in the hospital total 47 days. So 18 days in ICU and with the first incident, then the open heart surgery, 18 days in ICU, and then rehab for 11 days. And they actually sent me home earlier than they had planned to because they didn't want me to contract COVID. COVID was starting to run rampant in the where I was rehabilitating. And so they decided we better get him home. They can take care of the rehab, the rest of it from there. But I said this started on March 6th. By July 1st, I was back at work full time and I did not take a day off. I took one day off. My mom passed away. I'm originally from New England, from Boston. And so I was able to, of course, go and be part of the ceremonies for my mom, but that's it. I took no days off. I started building the business locally through the internet, so everything became digital. We built a train the trainers model, the first I'd ever helped to build, and it was built virtually. And we were able to build capacity and high levels of engagement using the tool that we're using right now or something similar to it. Yeah, and I didn't skip a beat, just so to speak, just kind of kept going.
It's great to hear because I know some people, obviously people recover differently to things, but other people would possibly use it as an excuse to take more time off. But I always believe if you're interested in doing what you're doing, if your career is, you don't have to love it necessarily, but you kind of want to get back to being useful and creating something. How important was that for you?
Oh, incredibly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there. Even in the rehab center, I'm calling my boss with ideas that I have. There's only so much television you can watch. There's only, so many naps you can take.
Yeah.
You want to feel like you're contributing. I think the other piece too is, you're talking about, our role as men. I am and was the sole provider financially for my family. So I will tell you that was a huge motivator for me, Anthony and Nick, that I wanted to get back to work. I wanted to get back to providing. I wanted to get back to contributing. So I was highly motivated to, in essence, get back to work.
Yeah, I know so many men that it's funny, that society would have us think that a lot of men want to stay at home looking after kids as much as their wives, and for some that might be true, but I spend my entire time talking to men primarily middle-aged and older, and for a lot of us, you feel alive when you're building and working towards something. Generally a business or a career, and I've just had several calls in the last few days with guys who are in a career, but that career is sucking the life out of them, and they want to build something on the side, but of course you're juggling parenthood, sleep, fitness, health, the government trying to tax the shit out of you all the time. Which I was going to say, living out where you do, if you haven't, remind me where you live, but like, what's life like out there for a businessman at the moment? Because in the UK, if you didn't know better, you'd think the government were trying to destroy small businesses. They're doing their very best. So what's it like for you out there?
Well, I won't say it's easy. The organization I'm with now, NeuroPoints, is a startup. So we're 4 months in from launch, and we're working with schools and districts. That's our target audience. And a lot of things have been happening. There were federal dollars that were held back. It's the first time I've experienced that in my career, where they were held back. They were then released. But I heard just last week that not everybody has full access yet to all of their funds. So there's that. There was all of the COVID relief money that was out there, billions of dollars that were kind of thrust at these schools. They don't have that anymore. They didn't all follow the guidelines of how to spend those monies. They were supposed to be sustainable expenditures. And now they're finding, we don't have the money to keep this going, so they're having to cut people and programs and things like that. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the marketplace. So the decision to make a purchase is not as immediate as it might have been in the past. If they saw something that they thought was really beneficial, potentially, they'd be more inclined to move forward. there's a little more reticence right now, and it's a little disconcerting, not just from a business standpoint, but it's like I was talking to a friend who's an administrator in a district here in the Dallas area, talking about all the people needing to be let go, the budget deficit, and all this sort of thing. And I said, you know what, I get it. That's got to be incredibly stressful. That's a lot to deal with. But at the end of the day, your responsibility as a leader in a school district, in your system, is to improve the learning and the performance of the students that you serve.
Yeah.
So where there's a will, there's a way. You figure out a way. And I'm suggesting a way that's highly research-based and so forth. Maybe we start really small. But to use that as a reason, albeit perhaps an excuse, to not move forward, I think is not just, because we still have to do the job of educating kids well. And so, from the business standpoint, what does it mean? I've just got to salt the oats more than ever, so that they're willing to drink. So I have to think outside the box. I have to be a critical thinker. My daughter's a teacher. I was talking to her. I said, your father, who's 64 years old, as having to think creatively and think outside the box, because I can't do things the way I've always done them and expect to get this great result. It's not happening. Yeah. So I've got to be very thoughtful. I've got to be very creative. I've got to use all the tools. I have a podcast. I have a Facebook group. I have a huge LinkedIn following. I've got to take advantage of all these tools and use them in very creative ways. So I think that's what it means right now. People are feeling like they don't have as much money, so they're more reluctant to make the purchases and so forth. So really, it is challenging us on the other side. But I'm again resilient.
Yep.
Bring it on.
I think the call I was on earlier, we discussed the old adage of adapt or die. And yes, you are going to get thrown curveballs, be it AI trying to take jobs, it could be lockdowns, it could be government interventions, whatever it is. And you mentioned leadership. What I very much, like you kind of said, there's a lot of tools around, and people can often forget that things like, let's use LinkedIn as an example, if you're a professional, is for a lot of people an untapped resource of finding new customers, reaching new people, impacting others. What's your relationship been like with social media? Because you say you've got a decent sized following on LinkedIn, which I think now becomes harder to get, because maybe depending on the algorithms, but there's still a very small amount of people that actually post. So what's your relationship been like with social media, especially LinkedIn?
It's been amazing. You alluded to it earlier. I mean, I have connected with folks like you all, UK and South Africa. I just interviewed 2 weeks ago Al Kingsley, who has some royal title from King Charles for AI and education, and he's brilliant. And I never would have met him would it not be for LinkedIn. Brett Salakis, an AI leader out of Australia, had the opportunity to interview him on my podcast. Just building great connections, friendships, really, virtual friendships with folks that I never would have been able to otherwise. So I'm taking full advantage of LinkedIn and the way it's opening up the world. I have a degree, my undergraduate degree is in multicultural education. So while I'm from Massachusetts and I've lived, most of my adult life in Texas, I actually went to London and lived there for several months to teach, and then traveled around Europe and so forth. I've studied French for several years. I've been principal of bilingual schools, so I know some Spanish. So so I've always been enamored with different cultures, different languages, and all that. So LinkedIn has been a gift.
I love hearing that, because I get it that I always look at social media example, some people have a love-hate relationship with it. And I always think it's like water. If you don't have any water, you'll die. If you have too much water, you'll drown and die. So you've got to find that happy balance for you. And I see LinkedIn example for anybody that's running a business, as I always encourage guys to be on there, because I think if us three were sitting working as together as a company, if you're going to employ someone, you'll probably go and check them out on LinkedIn first.
Of course. Yes.
If there's no presence on there, that doesn't help you make a decision. Whereas if there's a presence on there and you read some of what they've posted, it gives you an idea of what kind of person they are. So I've helped various people. I don't have a massive following on LinkedIn. I think I've got 3,500 followers. But for me, I just think it's an untapped resource. Regarding your following on it, did you find that was a steady stream of growth, or was there anything particular you did that changed the kind of the amount of followers that you would gain and receive?
Yeah, I mean, it grew slowly at first. I think it's like anything else. Success breeds success. So, the more people that join and people see, oh, Nick is connected with Kevin on LinkedIn, I guess I better connect with him as well. So a little FOMO going on there, fear of missing out, want to be a part of this. So I think that helped it to grow. It's something that I do very deliberately. So building the network, building the growth. Sometimes people ask me, why did you reach out? Whatever. I'm building my network. You never know. You don't have to accept. We can go forward. And so, but it has been very intentional, very deliberate. But I think the other piece is the connecting of the dots, like I was talking about before. So, you have a podcast. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put the link to my podcast episode on LinkedIn. So, and the content is very varied. If you look at my content, you're going to see it hits everything from emotional to spiritual to intellectual to, work things to family things. You're going to see it all there. And I love, some people have said, oh, LinkedIn's becoming the new Facebook. And they bemoan that fact. It's like, oh, this is supposed to be very professional. Well, people do business with people. Yeah. So I sort of dismiss that criticism that people are displaying more of their humanity on LinkedIn, because that makes them more appealing, more real, more authentic, and me more likely to want to do business with them, to interact with them. So those are my thoughts on LinkedIn.
I totally agree. Nick, do you want to chop in if connection's good?
If the connection's good, yeah, thanks very much. I think, Kevin, the really, really interesting thing for me and the one which I kind of admire in your way of working is the intentionality. The fact that there's a specific intention about going out there, and as you say, it's not specific in one specific channel. And it's interesting because that's where I've sort of been playing around as well, is the fact that we are these multidimensional beings, and now we're trying to sort of shove us down one particular thing. So you could only talk about this one thing. And sure, I think in one particular space, if you're for example, graphic designer who wants to know more about graphic design, sure, follow someone who's in that particular space. But I think more around, we're talking about sort of generative AI. I think we're becoming generative humans, like we were always, but I think even more so as entrepreneurs. I think we kind of taking more of that space, right? As we are realizing the fact that, I chatted to a couple of people in my network, and then I kind of, you only do work in work time, and you only talk about work then, and you're not allowed to talk about any other time. And right. I'm finding that gray area, it's almost like this very black and white, that area is now starting to come, we call it gray, but actually it's more colorful because it becomes part of the life, right? And you can start picking things out in your, I love hitting golf balls, kind of not on a golf course, just at a driving range. And you kind of that, but then suddenly you're like, hang on, there's a metaphor here for life, because suddenly you're focusing on the ball and you want to beat the club and all this stuff. And then you're like, yeah, but that happened in a meeting today as well. And I think that's really beautiful. So I really love that intentionality and how sort of multicolored your content is. It's really, really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
I think if you're going to, I guess it depends what business you're in. If you run a local business that sells water butts or guttering, you probably don't, your social media presence probably might not be as important as if you're trying to think bigger. But I mean, I was on a course a couple of years ago online with a guy called Garrett J. Wyatt, who runs Wake Up Warrior, which is a large men's movement in the US. And I was on a 4-day intensive course. And I remember he said to me, if you're going to build a men's community, the world is very divided. And therefore, the quicker you can get rid of the people that aren't going to resonate with you, and the sooner you can bring in the people that are, the better. And be that, he used the word be polarizing. And I get it. He said, it's not to try and be like piss people off, but the more you can just be Kevin or Nick or Anthony, just put your views out there and put your energy out there, you'll have some people that won't like you, and that's okay. Who cares? But you have other people that say, hey, I really like the fact that, and, runs a podcast, thinks in, family and, being a good dad and fitness and health and, rabbit holes are all important things. And the more I've put that out there on LinkedIn, the more I've connected with more and more guys and women as well, but more guys who are just like, say, hey, I really like what you're about. And I'm like, cool. They're the kind of guys I want to hang around.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Just yesterday, I interviewed on my podcast a gentleman, Joel McLean from Canada, Franco-Canadian, and he actually competes in men's physique contests. So he says it's not the little Speedo, it's the board shorts and whatever. But his daughter took it up and end of high school, college, and so he thought, I'm going to support her and maybe train alongside her. And next thing he knows, I'll go ahead and sign up for that competition as well. And we ended up talking as much about fitness as we did educational leadership. He's author of a book. He's been a principal. He works, with the Ontario, with the Ministry of Education and so forth. So he's very multidimensional. But the analogies that he was able to strike between physical fitness, working out, and the work that he does as an educator and as a leader, I thought, wow, it just made it so much more rich than just talking about education and leadership, but combining those two pieces. It could have been something else, but for him right now, it happens to be a focus on physical fitness. And I love that he said he went to the gym for 5 years religiously, 5 days a week, you go to the gym, but really he was kind of going through the motions, just checking out the boxes. And then when he decided to become more intentional, he hired a coach, started working. He was just so amazed at changing his nutrition, having a more intentional routine, how dramatically the results changed. So that was powerful too. So whatever your job is, to get a coach, somebody that is, highly skilled and experienced in that field of work, to help refine, because it's so hard to do that for ourselves.
I totally agree. So 2 years ago, I launched a men's membership, and I wish I'd have done it a lot sooner. But what I'd seen is that a lot of guys who were in that middle age and beyond were kind of cut adrift on their own, and they were ambitious, and they wanted to have more success, whatever success was to them, monetarily or more freedom or better career. But it was really hard doing it on your own, because there's no accountability. There was, often you didn't really focus on what you wanted because no one had made you sit down and contemplate it. And that for me has been why I've been building over the years something that men can join. But recently, the last few guys I've spoke to, it's been so interesting to see how they'll correlate that things improved when they started taking care of themselves more. Yes. Fitness, health, sleep, your relationships, having those difficult conversations at home, not avoiding, sometimes people can hide from at home now because they're working from home a lot. Sure. And you forget to go out and, go to networking events and have a conversation. So I agree. It's leadership as well for me is as much about taking care of yourself and showing up as it is about, telling other people what to do, if that makes sense. Yes. Well, there's loads more for us to discuss, and perhaps we'll focus on one specific point in another podcast. And also you run your own podcast. So tell me just briefly about your own podcast and what that is like for you.
Sure. So real quickly, my podcast is called Just Thinking with Kevin Doherty. And I will perhaps differ a little bit with the advice you got from that individual who said to not piss people off, as you said, or polarize, but I really wanted a place where people could share what they're just thinking. So Anthony, your thoughts are your thoughts, right? You're not telling anybody else how to think. You're not trying to convince them, to think the way you think. Nick, the same. It's just the way Nick is thinking. And so we focus on education, but education touches everyone, because you either have kids or you were a kid or kids or, whatever. So education touches everyone, whether it's homeschool, traditional school, it doesn't matter. Education impacts everybody. And so I want to hear what the thoughts are around that. I've recorded over 50 episodes. I will say when I first started, I thought, I'm not a podcaster. I don't have that skill set. I don't have that background. And then, now I'm 50 some episodes in. I think, wow, I kind of got the hang of this. I know how to do this. I ask the questions, and then the guests are the ones that really move things forward. And I will tell you, I have a little bit of a pattern that I've followed. I ask for 3 main outcomes that my guest desires to to enjoy as a result of people listening to the podcast. So what are 3 takeaways that you want the listeners or the viewers to enjoy? And then I always end it with, is there anything else about what you're just thinking that I didn't give you an opportunity to address? So that's my hook at the end, and it's a pattern that I follow for all 50 plus episodes. And what I find is, as we were talking about on LinkedIn, just like us being connected right now, I ask people, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? There are a lot of people out there that love their 30 minutes of just sharing their thoughts or whatever. So it's been awesome from every walk of life, from every corner of the world, getting people on to share what they're just thinking. And so I imagine there are things that they say that might be at times a bit controversial, but for the most part, I try to steer clear of that because there is so much division. I don't want to divide the world further. As an administrator, I dealt with kids coming to my office that were fighting because of all the disagreements. I'd say, go in that room and sit down and write down 10 things you have in common. And they'd come back into my office and say, we could only come up with 3. I said, that's not enough. Go sit down, come back to you have 10. And every time they're arm in arm, hey man, we both love football. We both, and I'm like, oh, I thought you hated him. I thought no, man, he's cool. I love him. Never had a repeat offense. Focusing on the common ground is so underutilized. And we need to, it doesn't mean we don't have these different opinions and we aren't in different corners, but we have a whole lot more in common than we tend to focus on. So I really want to share that we all have thoughts. We're all just thinking. We're all blessed with this wonderful brain. Let's use it and let's share our thoughts.
Yeah, I love it because I do find myself, the UK, again, the media, when I say I don't tell people what to do, I say one thing I advise is just to steer clear of the media as much as possible, or just dip in and out, because their sole intention, from my view, is to kind of create that dread in people, which the worst thing now is that there is 24-hour news. So I'm 47, and as all of us, when you grew up, the news was basically for us 6 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, lunchtime and evening news. That was it. But now people can sit and just have it on loop, on repeat all day long. And I say the news isn't there to inform you. It's just decaying your mind. If you can switch it off, and you'll realize the people that you've been told to have an argument with and disagree with are actually, like you say, they like the same football team. They like a coffee, whatever it is. Where's the common ground in there? So I love it. And well, one final feature that we usually do is called Lost and Found, which is, again, has someone lost or found something in business? And I'll keep you in for that because you actually mentioned something that I'm gonna bring up. So I'm just gonna run this quickly, and then we'll come on to it. So hold on a second.
Okay.
Ever wonder how millions vanish into thin air, or how a single dollar can make all the difference? Join us on Lost and Found, where we dive into the wild world of financial mysteries. From misplaced fortunes to unexpected windfalls, we unravel the stories of people, companies, organizations, and even governments who've lost and found millions. Lost and Found, because every dollar has a story.
Well, what can I say? I'll bring mine up first. Nick, I don't know if you've got one today, but this is what...
I've got one. I don't have a really cool one like you, but I've got one.
About the government basically giving money out during the COVID stuff. And I actually spoke to a guy that worked for a big investment bank that in the UK was dishing out money. And he said, I'm telling you, we are just dishing out. We're doing no background checks really on what's going out. And we are rubber stamping loans in large volume for lots of people. And I don't think that was probably the tip of the iceberg of it's just spunking money left, right and centre. But I saw this come up today, which was in one of the newspapers, the Guardian, but it said £4 million hit to taxpayers via the UK Future Fund. The Future Fund launched during COVID to support startups via matched private investment and government loans has lost about 400 million due to bankruptcies, underperforming companies, and suspected fraud. What a surprise. And a big part of this was our previous Prime Minister, another joker called Rishi Sunak. And as far as I'm concerned, they're all puppets. There's no left or right. There's no red or blue. But I would guess that this is it's another hundreds of millions of taxpayers' money that has basically just vanished into other people's pockets, which we will never see again. But if we pay more tax, it'll all sort itself out. So don't you worry about that. Kevin, what's your thoughts? Because you're a smart guy. The government wastes money regardless of whether there's lockdowns or whatever. But it just blows my mind how much money the governments around the world have wasted on stuff.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback on what you just shared, and I alluded to it earlier, but the post-COVID money that was given to schools and districts, and it was in the billions of dollars. And so the idea was that it was intended to help recover from COVID and the pandemic. And there were certain guidelines that needed to be adhered to. So, you had to be something that was sustaining. You had to write a plan for it. It had to be approved by all the constituents of the school community and so forth. But here's what happened. First of all, not all that money was spent the way it was designed to be spent, nor did it have the desired outcome. But all the other federal dollars that were already part of the equation, there were dollars there that did not get spent and just got sent back, never to be seen again. Because quite frankly, the educational leaders did not have the time to do all of it. They still had 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the job became even more challenging, of course, post-COVID. And so all this money being thrown at things. And I want to connect one more dot, and that is the dot of intentionality. So why we say, oh, we're getting this money for this reason, but are the people that are getting the money, were they involved in the decision making about the why and the how this was going to be spent and so forth? And then beyond that, some level of accountability, kind of like we were just talking about. So, okay, so I took this amount of money that I was given based on the needs that I said that I had. These are the outcomes that I have enjoyed as a result. But again, it's this very fast thing. It does feel like a lot of times it's just very political. We're gonna give all this money because we know they need the money and they're gonna welcome the money, and who's gonna turn away money? But money in and of itself doesn't solve the problems. In fact, as you alluded to, sometimes it can even make matters worse.
Actually, it's a really good point. On this show a couple of months ago, I don't like to use the term debated because we had a conversation, but it's the guy that's the world leading expert in universal basic income. And what I said there, his big thing was, we should be paying more tax in certain ways. And I said, listen, in a way, it doesn't matter how much tax you're paying if how it's being spent and who's spending it are abusing it, if that makes sense.
Yes,
so
yeah.
It's always one of those, you might think it's good, as you say, having more money, but if it just disappears off in places, who knows? Another good rabbit hole to go down, to be honest. Nick, do you want to bring yours on screen if you can and take us through it?
Yeah, no, I won't bring it on screen, but I just want to quickly comment on the last point, and that is really fascinating in the fact that we, from a Nucleus perspective, we drive CSI and trying to build young entrepreneurs. So the whole reason why it's really the center of everything, and the idea was to build business sizing. That's obviously where it started. Or at least that was the intentionality. So Kevin, you talk about intentionality. There was huge intentionality about the name, the logo, and everything around that. So it's really beautiful to speak to other men or other business people who are as intentional, as awake as we are, because we're obviously all awakening on a trajectory on how that is. And looking at what we can do with young entrepreneurs is so fascinating because we can get access to the funding, the challenge, or we can get access to the funding, but then who do you actually give it to? And I say that with care because everybody's got an idea, right, are they dedicated to seeing that idea through? And that links back to what you were saying earlier about the whole thing of, do you love what you're doing? Because if you love what you're doing, then you'll work harder. You'll make sure that it comes up. And Kevin, your idea of resilience, beautiful, because you've got to have the resilience, you've got to have the drive, you've got to have the love. Because as soon as you have that, then the beauty starts happening. So it's really interesting, because that's just money getting shoved into businesses, and there's no vetting of whether or not there's any intentionality whatsoever. So just a random one. Not quite random, but the delivery systems, because I've spent a little bit of time researching the US, Kevin, and having a look at what the FedEx and what Amazon's doing and all those guys, just generally from what for how that's working. And there's a lot of competition in that space. And so this year, my lost dollar for this week is that FedEx has actually posted a profit, which wasn't expected. And for a marketplace, interestingly enough, I think is probably a pretty good. So I think they've been working quite hard in the background to get their stuff, their operations far better. And I think customer engagement has got to be a lot better as well. And I think that's, if I have a look at what their market strategy is, it's based on how, talking to customers and getting that link better. And then with operational efficiencies is probably why they've posted a profit, a loss, or at least flatline. So that's a found on, Anthony.
As opposed to my one was one of those. Well, this is why I find it interesting to talk about business, because especially on podcasts, because you never know where things are going to go. And when I was hosting my own podcast, I used to do a bit more research, but then I realized that sometimes it's nice to have an organic conversation and just see. But Kevin, I guarantee you're going to have me asking you back on at some point, because I'd like to talk about virtual reality. I'd like to talk purely about leadership as well. Sure. There's plenty of stuff. And I know you obviously have your own podcast. I love talking about the movement I'm creating with men and helping middle-aged men. So as and when, I'd love to come to your podcast space. I'm sure Nick would as well.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. Well, I'm gonna run the exit, and we'll have a quick chat afterwards. Hold on a second.
Okay.